All right, it is Tuesday in first period, sci-fi, fantasy, which, by the way, this is another sci-fi story. We're going to get to the fantasy soon. But next class, on Thursday, we're going to have a live video, and we're going to start a little project where you're probably going to work on it for about a week. So that'll include Friday, the e-learning as well, which will involve choosing a story. So choosing a movie or book or something else, and then presenting it a certain way. So you might think about what are some sci-fi and fantasy stories you might choose for that. Anyway, today is our third assignment where it's a single story and we ask some questions. It's a pretty short one, I think 9 pages. So we got a story from Arthur C. Clarke. You might have heard the name. He wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a novel that got turned into a pretty well-known movie. In fact, I have the movie poster over here on my wall. And this one is a little different than the stories we've read so far because those were, I think they were both 1991, but they were both around the same time. And this story's from the 50s, so it has a little bit of a different feel. It's not what you might imagine from the 50s. It doesn't have Godzilla or, robots who, if they end up saying a contradiction, their head spins around and starts smoking. But it does feel of its time in a way. So this story is about these scientists, these almost like salesmen who work for a company that makes a computer. And again, this is a computer in the 50s, so it's a big old cabinet thing. It takes up the whole wall, and it doesn't have any beautiful interface with touch screens and speech controls, but it's more of a really big, really fast calculator is what they're imagining. And that was great for certain things. In the 50s, they used computers for breaking codes in wartime or, calculating physics equations that would have taken forever to do by hand, things like that. So in this story, a group of monks comes to these computer scientists and salesmen and researchers and says, hey, we want to modify this computer so it doesn't work with numbers, it works with letters, and we want to calculate and show all the possible permutations of the names of God. And they say, you know what, we have this special alphabet that's going to capture all the sounds we need in different languages. And, our belief is that we need to say the true name of God. Nobody's gotten it quite yet, but if we try every single possibility, then hey, how could we miss? So that's the setup. That's the premise, is you've got the two groups. You've got these monks and these scientists, and they don't quite understand each other. They don't really know why the other one acts the way they do, but in this case, they are going to make a deal. They're going to make a business deal. So take a minute, read that through, and then I got some questions for you guys, which I tried to make it so that the questions don't have spoilers so that I don't say what happens at the end. So I'll look at them before we go. One is just in general, the way you approach literature. I want to always look at it just as a story and not always focus on the sci-fi stuff. But in this one, I want to say, usually the most important character is one who changes. Okay, they might start out as the bad guy, or they might start out as the good guy, or you might call them different things, but on a very basic level, the character that ends up changing is usually the one that's, again, the protagonist, but not always the hero. In this story, who changes the most? And then two, we got human characters, okay? We don't hear what the computer thinks. It's not like a sentient, speaking, thoughtful computer. It's more of a giant calculator. Or we don't hear from the god in this story. But we get two different perspectives. The monks and the scientists have very different ways of looking at things. And so the question is, what do they want, and what do they not understand about the other guys? That's very important to not only just kind of have a general sense, but really think about what are the details. 3 is this story's from the 50s. And like I said, it doesn't have Godzilla, it doesn't have flying saucers or aliens with big heads, but it is from the culture. So what's one thing about the story that shows the 50s nature, something that might be different if the story were written today or another time? For example, everyone in this story is a man. There's no woman. If you made the story today, you'd definitely have more diversity. They wouldn't be all guys. I kind of imagine, it doesn't really give much physical description, but I kind of imagine these as guys with, like, you know, those white button-down shirts with a short sleeve and like a thin tie, like the guys in Apollo 13 or something. But what's another idea? What's another thing that exists in a certain culture, a certain time? 4 is that this is a story about supernatural stuff. This is about a group of people who are worshiping a god, and they're trying to achieve a supernatural outcome, and they think that words have magic powers. That's a fantasy thing. You know, that's like what you would do if you were trying to summon a creature from a ritual with a spell. And this one is approached with a sci-fi angle. So how does that make it different? And how would it be different if these were, in the Lord of the Rings universe instead or something? And finally, when you get to the end and you see what happens, I don't want to spoil it before you read, but you see that, the story could have gone another way. It's really kind of quirky and fun, and you can almost imagine this as like one of those Star Trek episodes where they kind of laugh at what's happening because it's not super high stakes, but it really is. And so what do you think about the presentation? The author decided to make it kind of light and fun, even though the events aren't always that way, which is another element of sci-fi. You can often treat stuff that is like, a planet being destroyed in Star Wars, and then a couple minutes later you get back to making jokes. So you can kind of use sci-fi to make different tones that wouldn't normally be there. So those are your questions for today. I'm not going to make this video too long, so I'm going to stop here. While you guys are reading that, I'm going to go back and look at some of the assignment from last time. I might not be able to finish grading them all today, but that's the plan, is I'll look at those, put in a grade, usually put a comment. If you don't see a comment on the Google Classroom assignment thing, it might be a comment on the Google Doc. But that's it. Our first bigger thing will start next class, and this is just another standalone assignment. Thanks.